Hey, help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also hit that like button to subscribe if you want more Cavs-focused content.
The Cavs play the Miami Heat in Game 2 today. Very good start for the Cleveland Cavaliers. I want to take a listen to the Locked On Heat podcast by David Ramil and Wes Goldberg. They had a segment about what adjustments they're going to make for Game 2 for the Cavaliers. I want to listen and react to that so, we can do some behind enemy lines scouting before the game to see what Heat fans feel like is the adjustments they need to make and what the Cavs should be prepared for.
It's easy to kind of just look at those two bookends and kind of draw your conclusions from that. But Miami got into a deficit early on. They made things competitive for the rest of the game. And then towards the end of the game, they allowed Ty Jerome to go off and have his scoring kind of tick up pretty substantially. And that being the case, I think Eric Spoelstra would want to focus on ways of making that 48 minutes of consistently high-level defense. So to answer your question, I think his focus is going to be on bringing a much more concerted defensive effort and then kind of just let the scoring come where it may. Like, obviously, they're going to need to put up some points. And I think that they did a pretty good job of that for the most part. At the same time, we've seen Miami's defense fuels their offense. And especially if you want to get things going for a number of players on this roster, if you can force Cleveland to turnovers, which isn't easy to do, and you can get those kind of defensive stops early in the shot clock, maybe ignite some transition offense, you'll get the points you need to beat Cleveland.
Yeah, I agree on the defensive part of it. I don't know that I care very much that Ty Jerome went off.
Huh.
It's game one. It happened.
Yeah.
If that's going to happen, it's going to happen, right?
Defensive stops early in the shot clock, maybe ignite some transition offense, you'll get the points you need to beat Cleveland.
Yeah, I don't know if just playing good defense is going to be a good strategy against the Cavs. This is the number one offense in efficiency, and the Heat just aren't that. So being able to match the Cavs, you're going to have to take out a significant chunk of what they could do, and what the Cavs do well. Keep in mind, Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, and Ty Jerome went off last night versus the Miami Heat. But that's not the only part of the Cavs offense that they can exploit against Miami, right? You're going to expect at some point in this series to get 20 points in a game from Jarrett and Evan. You're going to expect at some point in this series to get a nice 15 to 20 points from DeAndre Hunter, right? Like, you're going to expect to get more from the bench players that aren't Ty Jerome, more from, the starters that weren't Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. Like, the Cavs have a lot more they can unleash. And if your plan is we're going to play good defense, stop the Cavs, limit their scoring, it's a really simple game plan, but I don't think it has a high chance of success because the Cavs just aren't very limited on what they can go to. If you want to stop their perimeter game, try to force some turnovers, then the Cavs will just adjust to moving the ball more at the top of the key and then getting open looks for their bigs. So I don't know if there's a lot that Miami can do to really adjust, but let's listen to what Wes has to say.
Yeah, I agree on the defensive part of it. I don't know that I care very much that Ty Jerome went off.
Huh.
It's game one. It happened.
Yeah.
If that's going to happen, it's going to happen, right? To me, I'm looking less at the shots that Cleveland got. That's not much of my concern for Eric Spoelstra. That's focusing too much on what can we make Cleveland not do in terms of, can we not get them? They're going to get good shots. The number one offense in the league. Their shot chart is so efficient. They are just an efficient machine. My thing, if I'm Eric Spoelstra, is what can we force them into? And that is the turnovers. That is getting steals. That's the stuff, because that's what connects the defense to the offense. The getting stops of it, I guess, is important, but it's more of just taking the ball away that I think if we're talking about Miami making this a series and potentially upsetting them in a game or two or even in this series, it has to be dramatic. And they have to win the possession battle. It starts there. And they lost the possession battle in this one by a decent margin. They need to create more turnovers. That's the number one thing I'm looking at. They had 7 turnovers. That's not enough. They only forced 7 turnovers in that game. They had 14. So that's a huge loss, right? They had twice as many turnovers as Cleveland did. You can't do that. The weird thing is Miami really scored well off transition in game 1. Pretty much every time they forced a turnover, they scored off of it. And that bodes well for them. If they can just create more turnovers, you're taking points off the board for Cleveland or potential points off the board for Cleveland, and you're creating points more often than not on the other end for yourself. How do you do that? I think is a fair question to ask. Can they blitz on those small pick and rolls that
I would
Cleveland
not do
loves
that.
to run, right? Where they have Sam Merrill or Ty Jerome or Darius Garland set a screen for Donovan Mitchell and kind of get Mitchell onto the matchup that they want, usually Tyler Hero. I think that's part of it. More full court pressure, especially full and half court pressure, right in the half court line. Make it so that maybe they a little over and back here or there. Just get them in a bind, get them on the baseline a little bit, get them on the sideline a little bit. More traps, more pressure, just more all out. And I know that's not what Miami always does.
No.
But they're also not always playing Cleveland. Like they've got to pull out some of the stops. And I just felt like they played it a little safe defensively in game.
So I get what Wes is saying there. And again, you're looking at this from the Miami side. You're going to be more hopeful for your team than and somebody watching this channel would be for the Heat. But the issue, the thing I think does work against the Cavs, or at least has shown signs of bothering the Cavs for at least a quarter or two, is like the full court pressure stuff, right? Like that has been something that gets on the Cavs' nerves. Is that full court kind of half court pressure that he's talking about? The problem with that is that the Cavs are capable of breaking that kind of pressure. And once they break that kind of pressure, you got nothing else to really adjust to. Another thing that needs to be said, right? Miami's whole thing is we're going to outwork you. And in game 1, they got outworked by Cleveland. Like Cleveland was a team that looked hungrier, that wanted to win the game more than Miami. And that's Miami's whole thing, right? The Cavs, it was Donovan Mitchell diving at loose balls, going at it on fast breaks, right? Jared Allen gets the block on Bam Adebayo on a fast break that most teams just give up and say, hey, take the 2. The Cavs had demonstrated just more intensity. So if you're going to try to out-intense the Cavs, that might be a difficult proposition because that's what you tried to do in game 1, and the Cavs thoroughly out-energied you, right? The Cavs are also the fresher team. So if you're going to try that and you're the more fatigued team, you run the risk of it might working for a quarter or two. But when you get into quarter 3, quarter 4, do you still have the energy when for you, this is what? Playoff game number 4 for the Cavs, playoff game number 2 with a ton of rest in between. And we're at home. We've been at home for 2 weeks. No, 3 weeks, my bad. I don't know if you win that proposition. The Cavs are fresher. Cavs have more energy. Cavs are not taking you lightly. So I don't know if that strategy is going to bear a lot of fruit. And then the idea of like blitzing these pick and rolls, I hope they do that. Because if you blitz the Cavs on a pick and roll, you're signing your death certificate because the Cavs are so good at passing out of these situations, finding the open man, and then making open shots. And that's going to create a recipe for role players to have really big days at home in Cleveland, right? Maybe if you're in Miami, this is a strategy you go to try to win game 3. But game 2 on the road, when the Cavs role players could be due for one, I don't really freak out there. I think he's on the right track with I wouldn't over adjust to Ty Jerome because he got 30. Just because Ty is capable of giving you 30 on any given night, but he doesn't give you 30 every night, right? Like, we know that's true. So I wouldn't change my whole defensive outlook just to account for Ty when the Cavs have another 6 Man of the Year candidate on their bench, and DeAndre Hunter that you have to think about, who did not score last game, but will probably make his mark sooner than later. Let's continue.
One where they need to be a little bit more aggressive, and we'll talk about this later, but that's also where Davion Mitchell comes in. That's a part of it, but it can't all just be Davion Mitchell either. These guys got to be more aggressive defensively.
I mean, it does a good job of, if you set that high trap, or you kind of put pressure as they cross over the half court line, or maybe even that full court pressure that you mentioned, kind of denies the ability to set those high screen and rolls, and it kind of takes Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley away from where they were so effective in keeping Miami away from the paint too. So, it would shift their offense a little bit more. I think, look, they're going to be difficult to stop. So it's just a matter of trying to make things difficult for them and keep them away from, as you said, getting into some comfortable spots that they were able to get into in game one. So I agree that you've got to do something. Like, you can't afford to go down 2-0 against a team as good as Cleveland. And I know you could always say, well, they did what they were supposed to. You come back home, and Miami hasn't been a very good home team. We've seen them lose a number of games at home, and this is not in the playoffs. This was during the regular season. I don't know that they're necessarily going to turn it up a notch once they come back to game 3 on Saturday. So
Cleveland got whatever they wanted in that game too. It's not even like the results are one thing. It's the process. To me, is the Cavs just never sweat in that game. It felt like, they kind of just got everything they wanted. So it's more than just getting the stops.
I don't know if I saw some comments there that maybe Cleveland didn't play their best game, or they could have been so much better. Yeah, maybe, but they weren't. Like, I know some players struggled, and you could say, well, maybe they struggled because Miami did a really good job defending them. I don't know that they didn't sweat. I think they understood the challenge. I really do look at it as the bookends in that sense. Like, they blew out Miami in the first quarter, or got that early lead there, and then what we saw from Ty Jerome to end the fourth, like that was it. Like, had they managed to avoid that, who knows? Like, I mean,
I had to disagree with David there. The Cavs really didn't sweat in that game. They were up 8 most of it. Miami did not go away, right? And I think there's a difference between a blowout and a close game, and we're somewhere in between there right now with this one. But the fact is that when Darius needed to get a bucket, Darius could get a bucket at will. When Donovan needed to get a bucket, Donovan could get a bucket at will. And when Ty decided he wanted to get a bucket, Ty could get the bucket at will, right? There was at no point where it felt like the Cavs were locked out of scoring. Doesn't mean that Miami made it easy, right? But there wasn't enough resistance to stop the Cavs from getting to where they wanted to get to on a consistent basis throughout the night. And I think when you look at the shots that were missed by players who usually make those shots, DeAndre Hunter, most important, I just don't think we gave him a ton of looks on offense, most importantly. But, I think what Isaac Okoro was pretty atrocious from the floor. I'd be surprised to see if he plays 11 minutes again in the playoffs for the Cavs, at least in this series. So it was also the Cavs weren't throwing out their best players. Like, we played 10 players in this game. I think if they kept the rotation to 8, they probably generate those same shots for better players who can make those shots. Like, so it's Sam Merrill instead of Isaac taking those corner threes. And then all of a sudden the night looks a lot better. And look, Donovan Mitchell's not going to shoot 1 from 9 or 2 for 9 or whatever he shot from 3. It wasn't like a lot of those threes were contested. A good chunk of those were open threes. I don't think Miami really made the Cavs think on offense, right? And I think that's the most important thing. Did the Heat make the Cavs have to think a ton on offense? Did the Cavs have to call timeouts to try to figure out how to score against Miami? That didn't happen. And that's why I think it was pretty green for the Cavs whenever they wanted, because Miami really couldn't offer up any resistance. And I think that's why it was so guard dominant with the scoring, where you get like 90 points out of 3 players, because you could do nothing about those 3 players, and the Cavs knew it. So they just used that. You know, they didn't really need to get a big game from Evan. They didn't really need to get a big game from Jared. But Jared could have had a better game if you needed Jared to have a better game. So I don't really agree with that synopsis. I understand, though. You know, you're looking at this from the Miami perspective, so it's going to be a little bit different. I think the Heat, and they alluded to this in this episode, they're going to try to put Davion on the field, on the court more. And I think Davion Mitchell seeing more minutes is going to be very important for the Miami Heat, because he seems like he's not their best player, but he's the most annoying player that the Miami Heat have. And I mean that in the most endearing way possible, right? When Davion checks into the game, you know, I got to make sure I watch where 45 is, because he's going to do something. He's going to make an impact on the game. And I think he is the one player that's really embodying the Heat culture on that Miami Heat team, where it looks like he wants it just as much as the Cavs do. And that kind of attitude could be infectious. So if I were the Heat, I would start him, because you just need that right now. The Cavs outwilled you in that first game. You need to show that you can do the Heat culture thing and outwill the Cavs back. And I think Davion in the starting lineup is probably your best bet to do that. But if I'm looking at this again from the Cavs perspective, that's a really small guard that you're putting out there. Now, he can score. I think he did good against Darius Garland, and he's a good defensive player. But it does free the Cavs from having to worry about a size mismatch with Darius on the floor when he's out there. So it's not like they constantly have to worry about, all the defensive adjustments that come with that. So it's a two-sided sword, but if I'm Miami, I would definitely take it, because I think you get the better end of it. But let me know what y'all think in the comment section down below. Appreciate the Locked On Heat podcast. Hope y'all don't mind me reacting to your show if you stumble across this. All respect, all love. And make sure, if you want to know more about the Miami Heat or keep locked in with what the enemy perspective is during this series, go subscribe to them at Locked On Heat. But y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.